The slave market was loud, full of cruel voices, and filled with the smell of fear. Merchants shouted prices, guards pushed broken slaves, and the crowd laughed at their misery. The stage was high, with bright lights shining on those who were for sale. Every alien that stood there was chained. Beaten and silent among them was a young alien girl, her skin pale, her body weak, and her spirit almost gone. She had been starved, tortured, and dragged from place to place. Her limbs trembled, her eyes were empty, and she had already stopped believing in life. To the auctioneer, she was nothing more than trash to be sold for the lowest price. The auctioneer raised his voice and shouted, "This worthless creature! Weak, broken! Not even worth a meal!" The crowd roared with laughter. Some threw scraps of food at her, others spat on the ground. The alien girl lowered her head. She did not fight back, she did not cry. She only waited for her end. For her, there was no reason to resist anymore. Then the auctioneer banged his staff on the ground. "Who will take her? Who will pay for this useless slave? Even a single coin is enough." The laughter grew louder. No one raised their hand. No one wanted her. At that moment, something strange happened. A human man walked into the market. His steps were firm, his face calm, and his eyes sharp. He wore a dark jacket with patches of space dust. His boots were worn out, but he walked like a man who feared nothing. The crowd noticed him and whispered, "A human, here?" Humans were rare in this market. Most humans stayed away from such cruel places, but this one walked straight toward the stage. The auctioneer smirked. "Ah, a human. Do you want to laugh with us too? Look at her. Even her own people would not pay for her." The crowd laughed harder. The human did not laugh. His gaze stayed on the alien girl. She was trembling, her head down, her arms shaking under the heavy chains. He could see her hopelessness, and for a brief moment, he saw something familiar: pain, loneliness, and the will to survive. The auctioneer waved his hand. "No one will buy her, she is useless, let us move to the next one." The human suddenly spoke, his voice was strong, cutting through the noise of the hall. "I will take her." The entire market froze. The laughter stopped. The auctioneer blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. "What did you say?" The human repeated, louder this time. "I will take her." The auctioneer laughed. "You must be joking, a strong man like you, wasting money on this broken thing?" The crowd laughed again, pointing and mocking. But the human did not smile. His eyes were locked on the girl, and his face showed no hesitation. The auctioneer leaned forward. "Fine then, human, tell me, what will you pay for her? A single coin, too?" The human's reply silenced the hall again. "I will give you my ship." The crowd gasped. Shock filled the air. A whole ship? For a useless slave? The noise rose, everyone shouted in disbelief. The auctioneer's eyes widened, then narrowed. He tried to read the human's face. Was this a joke? Was the man mad? Ships were worth more than 100 slaves. The alien girl raised her head for the first time. Her weak eyes focused on the human. She could not believe what she heard. A ship, for her. Why, the human stood tall. "You heard me. I will give you my ship. In exchange, she comes with me. Right now." The auctioneer burst into laughter again, but this time it was different. It was the laughter of greed. His heart was racing. The human's ship must be valuable, and he could not resist such a deal. The crowd shouted, "He is mad. He has lost his mind." No slave is worth a ship. But the human did not care. His eyes never left the girl. He knew the risk, he knew what it meant, but something inside him told him this was the right choice. The auctioneer slammed his staff on the ground. "Done! The slave is yours. Give me the ship codes now." The human walked forward, handed a small device, and without a word confirmed the transfer. The auctioneer's eyes glowed with greed as he checked the codes. He laughed and shouted, "The ship is mine." Guards dragged the alien girl forward and threw her at the human's feet. She stumbled, barely able to stand. She looked up at him with weak, confused eyes. The human bent down, reached out his hand, and said softly, "You're free now." The girl trembled, her lips parted, but no words came out. She could not understand why he did this. The auctioneer laughed from behind. "You are a fool, human. You gave up everything for nothing." The crowd laughed again, but this time the laughter sounded different. It was not as strong as before, for deep inside, everyone felt something they could not explain. The human ignored them all. He helped the girl stand, his hand steady, his eyes full of determination, and in that moment, a story began, one that would echo far beyond this market. The market was still buzzing with shock after the human's insane offer. The auctioneer gripped the device that held the ship's codes, greed shining in his eyes. Around him, the crowd shouted, laughed, and whispered. Some called the human brave, others called him mad. But one thing was certain. The entire slave market would remember this moment. The alien girl stood weakly at the man's side. Her chains had been removed, but her body still carried the marks of slavery. She struggled to stand, her knees shaking. She could not understand why this stranger had given away his ship, his life for her. She kept her eyes low, afraid that any sudden movement might anger him. The human bent slightly and spoke, his voice calm. "Come with me." His words were simple, but his tone carried something she had not heard in years. Kindness. The auctioneer called out, "Enjoy your prize, human. Your foolishness has made me rich." The laughter of the crowd echoed again, but the human ignored them. He placed his arm gently under the girl's shoulder and helped her walk. Every eye in the market followed them. The guards whispered, "Why would he do this?" A merchant muttered, "No man risks everything for a slave, unless he has a secret plan." Some even guessed that the human was lying, that the ship was worthless. But the auctioneer checked the codes again and again. They were real. The ship was his. The human had truly given up his vessel for a broken alien girl. As they stepped out of the auction hall, the cold night air hit their faces. The alien girl shivered. The streets were crowded with merchants and criminals. All of them stared at the strange pair, one human and one weak. "Unwanted slave," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why?" The human glanced at her. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that." His words struck her like lightning. Simple, direct, and impossible to believe. No one had spoken to her like that since she was a child. They walked through the narrow streets. The girl leaned on him, every step heavy. She expected him to let her fall, to grow tired of her weakness, but he never did. He supported her as if she were someone important. Soon they reached a dark corner near the docking bays. The girl looked around nervously. "Your ship? Where is it?" she asked softly. The human stopped, his jaw tightened. His eyes turned away for a moment, then he said, "I don't have one anymore." The truth hit her harder than the chains ever did. He had given up his ship, his only way home for her. She froze, her eyes wide. You gave it all for me?" He nodded. Yes, she wanted to ask more. But words died in her throat. She had no answer for such madness. No one in her life had ever sacrificed anything for her. Not even her own people when they sold her into chains. The human leaned against the wall, scanning the streets. He knew the auctioneer would not let him leave so easily. A greedy man was never satisfied. Giving away the ship was only the first step. Trouble was already brewing. Inside the market hall, the auctioneer sat on his throne, his hands rubbing the device greedily. Yet the more he thought, the more anger burned inside him. A ship was valuable, but he could have demanded more. The human's face haunted him, too calm, too confident. This was not a normal buyer. The auctioneer snapped his fingers. "Send the mercenaries. Find the human. Bring the girl back. I want both." His guards bowed and spread into the streets. Back in the dark alleys, the human felt danger closing in. He had been in situations like this before. He knew greed, he knew betrayal. He could almost hear the footsteps of hunters already searching for them. The girl looked at him, fear rising in her eyes. "They will come. They will take me again." Her voice cracked. He turned to her, steady and firm. "Not while I'm alive." His words were not loud, but they carried the weight of iron. The girl trembled. She wanted to believe him. But her life had taught her only one thing. Humans, aliens, everyone looked out only for themselves. Yet this man stood here empty-handed, shipless, and still promising to protect her. The human looked at her again. "What's your name?" She blinked, lost her name. "No one had asked her that in years, Lyra," she whispered. "My name is Lyra." He nodded. "Lyra, I'm Jaren." For the first time, he told her his name, and for the first time, she felt like a person, not a thing. Suddenly, a shadow moved behind them. Jaren's instincts sharpened. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her into a side alley, just as a group of armored mercenaries marched past. Their weapons glowed in the dark. Their voices carried one command. "Find the human and the girl," Lyra gasped. Terror flooding her chest, Jaren pressed a finger to his lips. Signaling silence, they waited, hidden between piles of broken crates until the mercenaries passed. The girl's breathing was fast and shaky. Jaren whispered, "We need to move, they won't stop." Together, They slipped deeper into the shadows of the alien city, hunted by greed, chased by mercenaries, and bound by a strange bond that neither of them understood yet. And as the night stretched on, one truth became clear. Jaren had risked everything, and now both their lives hung by a thread. The alien city never slept. Neon lights glowed over broken alleys. Strange creatures moved in the dark, and the smell of metal, oil, and blood filled the air. Jaren held Lyra's hand as they walked quickly through the shadows. Every corner felt dangerous. Every sound made her flinch. She was weak, her legs shaking with every step. Chains were gone from her body, but the weight of slavery still pressed on her spirit. Jaren glanced at her and slowed his pace just enough so she could keep up. He did not speak much, but the steady strength in his grip told her he would not let go. Behind them, trouble was already spreading. The Auctioneer had sent mercenaries to hunt them. Greedy men with sharp weapons and colder hearts. They did not care about the girl. They only wanted to please their master and earn rewards. Lyra's voice cracked as she whispered, You lost everything for me, your ship. Your future? Why? Jaren did not stop walking. His eyes scanned the alleys, sharp and alert. Because freedom has no price. The word struck her deeply. She had heard many things in her life, orders, insults, threats, but never this. Never had anyone told her that her life had value. They reached an old warehouse. The doors broken, the inside abandoned. Jaren guided her in. He found a corner with some broken crates and set her down. She collapsed, breathing heavily. Her body had not felt rest in weeks, maybe months. Jaren searched the place, found some dusty blankets and covered her shoulders. Then he sat opposite her, his back against the wall. His eyes were always listening, always watching the doors. After a moment of silence, Lyra asked, Why do you care? You don't even know me. Jaren's face softened just slightly. Because I was once like you. His voice was low, heavy with memory. She blinked, surprised. You, a slave? He nodded. Not in chains, but trapped, used, broken, left to die. I know the look in your eyes. I know what it means to feel worthless. That's why I couldn't leave you there. Her throat tightened. She wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come. Years of pain had stolen them from her. Yet his words lit a small fire inside, something she thought was dead, hope. But hope was dangerous here because outside the warehouse, boots struck the ground, shadows moved closer. The mercenaries had found their trail. One of them growled, The human is clever, but he won't escape the city. Spread out, check every ruin. He is ours. Inside, Jaren suddenly stood. His instinct screamed. He knew they were near. He quickly turned to Lyra. Stay behind me. No matter what. She shook her head weakly. They will take me back. They always do. He crouched in front of her, his eyes burning with steel. Not this time, Lyra. Not while I breathe. The warehouse door creaked open. Light spilled in. A group of mercenaries stepped inside. Their armor dark, their weapons glowing with sharp red energy. The leader smirked. Human, hand over the girl. Maybe we let you live. Jaren stood tall, his hands empty. His ship was gone. His weapons sold years ago. All he had were his fists, his brain, and his courage. He replied coldly. You'll have to kill me first. The mercenaries laughed. Easily done, they charged. Jaren grabbed a broken metal pipe from the floor. He swung with all his strength, smashing the first mercenary across the head. Sparks flew as the alien collapsed. The others attacked, but Jaren moved fast, ducking, striking, using the environment as his weapon. He had no armor, but his will was unbreakable. Lyra crawled behind the crates, watching in terror. She had seen many men fight before, but none like this. Jaren fought not for money, not for pride. He fought only to keep her free. The mercenaries shouted, Surround him! Don't let the girl escape! One of them rushed toward her hiding place. Lyra screamed. Jaren turned instantly. Rage exploding in his eyes, he leaped forward, slammed the pipe into the attacker's chest, and threw him aside like trash. But there were too many. Jaren was bleeding now. His arm cut, his breath heavy. Lyra's heart pounded. She wanted to hide. But something inside her shifted. She could not just watch him die. Her hand shook as she grabbed a sharp piece of broken glass from the ground. When another mercenary came close, she thrust it forward with all her strength. The alien howled, falling back. Jaren glanced at her, shocked. She had fought back for the first time. The fight grew wild. Bodies hit the ground. Blood stained the floor. Jaren and Lyra stood together, weak but unyielding. Finally, the leader of the mercenaries stepped forward, towering, stronger than the rest. He raised his weapon toward Jaren. You should have stayed silent. Human before he could strike, Lyra screamed, throwing the broken glass into his face. The alien staggered. Jaren seized the moment, driving the pipe into the leader's chest with a roar. The mercenary fell, silence filling the warehouse. The remaining attackers, shocked by their leader's death, retreated into the night. Their shouts faded into the city. Promising revenge, Jaren dropped the pipe. His chest heaving, his arm bled, but his eyes burned with victory. He looked at Lyra, who was shaking but standing. Her breath fast, her hands red. "You fought," he said softly. She lowered her eyes. "I was afraid." He shook his head, stepping closer. "No." "You were brave." Lyra's heart trembled. For the first time in years, she did not feel like a slave. She felt alive, she felt seen, but outside. The danger was not gone, the auctioneer would not stop, and the mercenaries would return. Jaren knew this was only the beginning. The price of her freedom had been his ship, his blood, and maybe soon, his life. Yet as he looked at her, standing tall despite her fear, he knew one thing: she was worth it. The warehouse floor was still wet with blood. Jaren leaned against a wall, his breath heavy. His arm was bleeding from a deep cut, but he ignored the pain. Across from him, Lyra sat quietly, her hands shaking. She stared at the broken glass, still stained red. The weapon she had used, her chest rose and fell quickly. Her heart did not believe what had just happened. For the first time in her life, she had fought back. For the first time, she had not been powerless. Jaren looked at her, his voice calm but firm. "We can't stay here, they'll come back. More of them." Lyra's lips parted. "But you're hurt." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter if we stay. We both die." He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and wrapped his arm tightly. Then he stood tall again. His body was tired, but his spirit burned like fire. He extended his hand toward her. "Can you walk?" Lyra nodded slowly. Her legs were weak, but she forced herself to stand. She placed her hand in his, and together they stepped back into the dark streets of the alien city. The night was alive with danger. Neon signs flickered. Voices echoed in different languages, and strange creatures watched them from shadows. Word of the fight had already spread. In places like this, secrets traveled fast. Everyone knew a human had given up his ship for a worthless slave. Everyone knew mercenaries had been killed. Whispers followed them through every alley. "That's them. The human and the girl. The auctioneer will pay gold for their heads." Jaren felt the eyes. He kept Lyra close, his steps fast. His mind searched for a way out. He had no ship, no allies. Only his experience and his will to survive. They turned a corner and entered a maze of narrow passages. The walls were broken, filled with graffiti. Garbage piled high. The smell of smoke and rot was strong. Lyra covered her nose, but she kept walking. Her trust in Jaren pulled her forward. Suddenly, behind them, boots hit the ground. Voices shouted, "There! Don't let them escape." Mercenaries more than before. The chase had begun. Jaren's eyes sharpened. He grabbed Lyra's hand. "Run!" They sprinted through the alleys, their feet slamming the ground. Lyra's breath came fast, her body screaming for rest, but fear gave her strength. She followed Jaren's lead, dodging through tight corners and jumping over broken pipes. The mercenaries shouted louder, firing energy shots that lit up the night. Sparks flew from the walls. The city became a storm of light and sound. Jaren pulled Lyra into a side tunnel, dark and wet. Water dripped from above, rats scattered at their feet. The mercenaries' footsteps thundered behind. The tunnel twisted left and right. A labyrinth of shadows. Lyra stumbled, almost falling. Jaren caught her before she hit the ground. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice steady even in the chaos. She nodded, teeth clenched, pushing herself harder. They emerged into a wider street filled with market stalls. Crowds of aliens shouted and bargained. The sudden light blinded Lyra for a moment. Jaren pulled a hood over her head and whispered, "Keep your head down." Blending into the crowd was their only chance. Jaren moved carefully, his eyes scanning every corner. The mercenaries arrived moments later. Shoving through the market, their weapons drawn, they shouted, "A human and a slave girl. Find them!" The crowd erupted in fear. Stalls crashed, people screamed. Jaren used the chaos, guiding Lyra between bodies. Slipping through gaps, his heart raced, but his face stayed calm. One mercenary's eyes landed on them. He shouted, "There!" Energy fire cut through the air, burning a stall behind them. Lyra screamed as Jaren pulled her away, running again. They rushed through the market and back into the alleys. This time, the mercenaries were closer. Their footsteps echoed like drums. Jaren's mind worked fast. He knew the city's underbelly had many secret paths. He once traveled here years ago. He turned left into an old maintenance shaft. Pulling Lyra inside, the place was dark, silent, and filled with rusted machines. They hid behind a broken engine. Lyra pressed close to him. Her body trembling, she whispered, "They won't stop. They'll hunt us forever." Jaren's jaw tightened. His eyes locked forward. "Then we make them regret it." The mercenaries entered the shaft, their lights cutting through the darkness. They moved slowly, checking every shadow. Their leader growled, "The human can't hide forever, find them." Lyra's breath quickened. Jaren placed his hand gently on hers. Steadying her, his eyes told her to stay quiet. The mercenaries came closer, their boots heavy, their lights brighter. Jaren's grip tightened on the metal pipe he still carried. His mind raced, fight or escape. A sudden sound saved them far down the shaft. A group of scavengers dropped a pile of metal. The noise distracted the mercenaries. They turned, weapons raised. Thinking the fugitives were there, Jaren seized the moment. He pulled Lyra through a small crack in the wall, hidden by shadows. They slipped into another tunnel, deeper, darker. The mercenaries shouted in anger as they realized too late. When they finally stopped running, Jaren leaned against the wall. His chest rising and falling, Lyra collapsed beside him, gasping for air, her face pale but alive. She turned to him, whispering, "Why do you keep risking everything? You could have escaped alone. You could have left me." Jaren looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because you are not nothing. Lyra, they told you that, but they were wrong. I will prove it." Her eyes widened. Her chest tightened. Something warm spread inside her, stronger than fear, stronger than chains. In the silence of the tunnels, hunted but not broken, they both understood one truth. Escape was not enough. If they wanted to survive, they would have to fight back. The tunnels were silent except for the sound of dripping water. Jaren leaned against the damp wall, his face pale from blood loss. His arm was still wrapped in cloth, but the wound was deep. He tried to hide the pain, but Lyra could see it in the way his body shook. She sat close to him, her hands fidgeting nervously. Her eyes studied him as if searching for answers. She whispered, "Why do you keep going? You've already lost so much." Jaren lifted his head, his gaze steady. "Because you're still alive. That's reason enough." The words hit her harder than chains ever did. She had spent years hearing only insults, words that made her feel worthless. Yet this man spoke to her as if her life mattered, as if her breath had weight in the universe. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Lyra slowly reached for the cloth on his arm. "Let me help," she said softly. Jaren hesitated, but then nodded. Her hands were gentle but unsure. She cleaned the wound with scraps of cloth and water from a rusty pipe. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best she could do. Jaren winced but did not pull away. He simply watched her, a faint smile touching his lips. "You've done this before?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, but I saw how they treated wounds in the camps. I had to learn or I would have died." Her voice trembled, and for the first time Jaren saw the pain behind her eyes. She had not told her story yet, but every scar on her skin spoke louder than words. When she finished, she looked at him nervously. "Did I do it right?" He flexed his arm, testing the bandage. "Better than most medics I've met." She blinked in surprise, then lowered her gaze. A faint warmth spread in her chest. It had been years since anyone praised her. Jaren leaned back, closing his eyes. "We'll rest here for a while. They'll be searching the upper streets. They won't expect us to stay this deep." Lyra hugged her knees to her chest. She was still afraid, but less than before. She kept stealing glances at Jaren. Trying to understand him, finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people. We were warriors once, strong and proud. But when the wars ended, they turned on us, sold us, broke us. I was only a child when they chained me." Her words cracked as if each one carried years of pain. Jaren opened his eyes and listened quietly. He didn't interrupt, he let her speak. "They told me I was weak, that I was nothing after a while. I started to believe it. I stopped fighting. I stopped living." She paused, her hands trembling. "And then you came. I don't understand why, but you didn't see trash when you looked at me." Jaren's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that pressed into her heart. "Because you're not trash, you're alive. You're worth more than any ship." Her chest tightened, and for the first time in years, tears rolled down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed, but Jaren didn't laugh. He didn't mock, he simply said, "It's okay to cry. It means you're still human." Still alive, silence filled the tunnel again. But this time it was warm, not cold. Hours passed slowly. The distant sounds of mercenaries faded. Lyra finally leaned against Jaren's shoulder, too tired to sit upright. She expected him to push her away, but he didn't. He simply shifted slightly so she could rest more comfortably. She closed her eyes, feeling his steady heartbeat under his chest. For the first time in years, she felt safe, not completely, but enough to let her guard down. When she drifted into sleep, Jaren looked down at her. His expression softened. He knew he had sacrificed everything. His ship, his freedom, his safety. But in this moment, he didn't regret it because in her fragile trust, he saw strength waiting to rise. The hours slipped away when Lyra woke again. She found Jaren still sitting there, still awake. His eyes were sharp. Scanning the darkness, he hadn't slept. She frowned. "You stayed awake all night?" He nodded. Someone had to keep watch. Her chest ached. No one had ever protected her like this before, she whispered. "You'll break yourself if you keep going like this." Jaren chuckled softly. "I've been breaking all my life. This isn't new." But she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight of his choices pressed on him. He had given up everything for her, and now he was carrying the burden alone. Something shifted inside her. She didn't just feel grateful, she felt a responsibility too. For the first time, she didn't want to be a burden. She touched his arm gently. "Then let me share the weight. I can walk, I can fight. I'm not as weak as I look." Jaren studied her face for a long moment. Her eyes were still afraid, but they carried a spark now. A fire he hadn't seen before. He nodded slowly. "All right, we'll carry it together." And in that dark, forgotten tunnel hunted by enemies, two broken souls made a promise without words. A bond of trust had formed, fragile but real, and it would change both their lives forever. The tunnels were quiet for only a short while. Jaren and Lyra thought they had gained a little time, but deep inside both knew the silence would not last. The auctioneer's greed was endless, and his mercenaries would not stop until they were caught. Jaren adjusted the bandage on his arm and stood up. His body was heavy with exhaustion, but his eyes stayed sharp. He looked at Lyra. "We need to move before they find this place." Lyra nodded, determination glowing faintly in her tired eyes. She had rested a little, and the warmth of trust she felt with Jaren gave her strength. For years she had been dragged around like an object, but now, for the first time, she was walking beside someone who treated her like a person. They moved through the underground paths, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone. Sometimes Lyra stumbled, but Jaren always caught her before she fell. Sometimes Jaren slowed, but Lyra urged him forward with quiet words. The bond between them was no longer fragile. It was growing stronger with each step. But danger was close. In the distance, faint metallic sounds echoed. The clank of boots, the hum of weapons, and harsh voices carried through the tunnels. The mercenaries were closing in. Jaren clenched his jaw. "They've found our trail." His voice was low, calm, but there was fire in it. Lyra's heart raced. "What do we do?" He turned to her, his eyes hard with resolve. "We fight." Her breath caught, fear rushed through her. But then she remembered the warehouse. She remembered how Jaren stood alone against so many, how he had risked everything for her, and she remembered how she had stabbed one of the mercenaries. Small but real proof that she was not as helpless as she believed. She nodded, her voice trembling but steady. "Then I'll fight too." They found a large chamber in the tunnels, broken machines scattered around, pipes dripping water. The place was wide enough to make a stand. Jaren moved quickly, dragging crates and metal pieces to form a barrier. His hands worked fast. Every motion filled with urgency. Lyra helped. Pushing smaller pieces into place, her arms shook, but she refused to stop. She wanted to prove she could carry the weight with him. When it was done, Jaren handed her a piece of metal shaped like a blade. "Stay behind the barrier. Use this if anyone gets close." She took it with trembling hands, staring at the reflection of her face in the dull surface. For a moment she saw the weak slave she had been, but then she blinked and saw something different. A survivor. The sounds grew louder. Boots struck the ground like drums. Voices shouted commands, and then in the distance, glowing red lights appeared. The mercenaries were here. Dozens of them, armored, armed. Moving with deadly purpose, their leader stepped forward. His voice echoing, "Human! Hand over the girl, we'll make your death quick." Jaren stood tall, his pipe gripped in his hands. His voice rang back through the chamber, calm but sharp. "If you want her, you'll have to walk through me." The mercenaries laughed, confident in their numbers. Then the order was given. Kill him. The fight began. Energy fire lit up the chamber. Sparks flew as beams struck walls and machines. Jaren ducked behind the barrier, dragging Lyra down with him. The blasts shook the ground, but he didn't flinch. When the fire paused, he leaped up, swung the pipe with brutal strength, and slammed it into the first mercenary who climbed over. The alien crashed to the ground. His weapon fell. Jaren seized it, firing wild shots back at the attackers. His aim wasn't perfect, but it forced them to scatter. Stay down, he shouted to Lyra. She crouched low, clutching the blade. Fear burned in her chest, but her eyes stayed locked on him. He fought like a man who refused to break. The mercenaries pushed harder, climbing the barrier, kicking debris aside. Jaren swung, struck, and blocked with desperate strength. But for everyone he knocked down, 2 more replaced them. One mercenary slipped past and charged toward Lyra. Her breath froze, but she remembered Jaren's words. Use it if anyone gets close. Her hand shot forward, driving the blade into the attacker's side. The alien roared, falling back. Lyra gasped, her body shaking, but she didn't drop the weapon this time. She had defended herself. Jaren glanced at her and shouted over the chaos, "Good! Keep fighting!" The chamber turned into chaos, metal clashing, weapons firing, shouts echoing. Jaren's body was cut and bruised, his movements slower with every strike, but he never stopped. His determination burned brighter than pain. Lyra stood behind the barrier, stabbing and pushing away anyone who got too close. Her fear was still there, but courage had begun to replace it. Every time she acted, the chains in her heart broke a little more. The mercenaries hesitated now. Their numbers were still greater, but the human's fury and the girl's defiance shook them. They had expected an easy hunt, not a desperate stand. Finally, the leader stepped forward. Massive and armored, his voice thundered. "Enough games, human, you're finished." Jaren's chest heaved. His face pale, his pipe was bent, his body near collapse. But when he looked at Lyra, standing, breathing, holding her weapon, something inside him flared. He straightened, his voice steady. "Then come and finish it." The leader roared and charged, his blade glowing with deadly energy. Jaren raised his broken pipe. Ready for one last strike, Lyra screamed, "No," and leapt forward, slamming her weapon into the leader's arm. The strike wasn't strong enough to kill, but it was enough to break his focus. Jaren seized the moment, swinging the pipe with every ounce of strength left in him. The blow cracked against the leader's helmet, sending him crashing to the ground. Silence fell over the chamber. The remaining mercenaries froze. Their leader lay broken. The human and the slave girl stood over him, bloodied but alive, one by one. The mercenaries began to retreat, dragging their wounded. Their whispers echoed as they fled. The human, he's not normal. The girl, too. Jaren dropped the pipe, his body shaking. He sank to one knee. Gasping for air, Lyra rushed to his side, catching him before he fell completely. Her arms wrapped around him tightly. Her voice cracked. "You didn't give up." "You never give up." Jaren looked at her, his face tired but his eyes still burning. "And neither did you." In that broken chamber, surrounded by fallen enemies, a truth was sealed. This was no longer a story of one man saving a slave. It was the story of 2 souls standing together. The chamber smelled of smoke and blood. Broken machines lay scattered. The floor was wet with dark stains. Jaren sat against a cracked wall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His arms were bruised, his clothes torn, but his eyes still held that same fire. Beside him, Lyra knelt, pressing cloth against his wounds. Her hand shook, not from fear this time, but from determination. She whispered, "Stay awake." "You can't leave me now." Jaren gave a faint smile. "I'm not going anywhere." His voice was weak, but his spirit was unbroken. The mercenaries were gone, dragging their dead and wounded out of the tunnels. Their whispers would carry through the city. Soon the whole market would know. A human had fought for a slave girl, and together they had defeated the Auctioneer's hunters. For years no one had dared to resist the Auctioneer. No one had dared to fight his men. But now a spark had been lit. Lyra looked at Jaren, her heart heavy but filled with something new. "You gave up everything. Your ship, your safety, even your blood. Why?" Jaren's eyes met hers, steady and calm. "Because no one deserves to live in chains, and because you're worth it." Her lips parted. She had no answer. For so long, she believed her life was worthless. But this man had burned down that lie with his actions. Every scar on her body had been called weakness. Yet in his eyes they were proof she had survived. She leaned closer, her voice low. Then I will never go back to chains. Not as long as I live, Jaren nodded. Good, because from this moment on, you're free. Those words broke something inside her. The invisible weight she carried for years finally shattered. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time she didn't hide them. She let herself cry because for the first time, they were tears of release, not pain. Hours later, when the city above grew restless with rumors, Jaren and Lyra slipped out of the tunnels. The streets were still dangerous, but the whispers had spread faster than the mercenaries. Faces turned as they walked. Aliens stared, some with fear, some with awe. Is that her? The human gave up his ship for her. They killed the Auctioneer's hunters. The story was already turning into something greater than the truth. And that was how revolutions began. They reached the edge of the city, where old docking bays stretched into the night sky. Jaren stopped, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had no ship anymore, no home waiting. Only an uncertain future. Lyra looked at him, her voice soft but firm. You lost your ship for me, but maybe together we can build something new. He raised a brow. You think so? She nodded, her eyes no longer empty. I used to believe I was weak, but now I want to fight, not just for me, but for others like me. If you hadn't come, I would still be in chains. There are many more who still are. Jaren studied her face, the fire in her eyes, the strength that had been hidden for so long. Slowly, he smiled. Then we start here. They found an abandoned freighter at the far end of the docks. Rusted, broken, barely functional, but it could fly. Jaren's hands moved across its panels, his knowledge of machines breathing life into the forgotten ship. Lyra watched him work, her heart full. He had given up his old vessel, but now they were building something together, not just a ship, but a future. As the engines roared to life, the city lights flickered below. The auctioneer would send more men, the markets would not forget. But now they had a chance to escape, a chance to carve their own path. Inside the cockpit, Lyra sat beside Jaren, her hands resting on the controls. Her eyes shone with something she had not felt in years. Freedom, she whispered. Where do we go now? Jaren glanced at her, his lips curving into a grin. Anywhere we want. The ship lifted off, rising into the star-filled sky. The city shrank below them, its noise fading into silence. For the first time, chains no longer defined her, and sacrifice no longer defined him. Together, they were something new. As the freighter broke into the stars, the whispers of their story spread across the galaxy. Some called the human mad, others called him a hero. But to Lyra, he was something else. He was the one who gave her life back. And to Jaren, she was no longer a slave girl. She was a survivor, a fighter, and now, his companion in a journey that had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, filled with danger and cruelty, but it was also filled with hope. And hope, once lit, could never be silenced.